Hello, I'm Phil.
Hey friends, Kyle here.
We're glad to have you back on the Invitation podcast. Kyle, a couple episodes we said that we would dig into the human vocation this time, but we're going to put that off a couple episodes.
Why is that?
Because I feel like there's a couple more invitations that Genesis 1 is making.
Of course you do. Leave it to the Genesis guy to find more in Genesis, but it's good. There's some fun stuff that we don't want you to miss.
Yeah, and that's the heart of it, is that there's so much in here that we could go episodes and episodes on, and maybe at a later date we can, but for now there's a couple key invitations that I believe that God has made to that we just have to cover first before we get to Genesis 2.
Yeah.
So today we are going to dig into the topic of light and dark, and we'll focus on this verse here. It is Genesis 1, verse 3, and it says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good and separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called light. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day." So Kyle, when it comes to the theme of light and darkness, what are some things that come to mind?
I mean, instantly I go straight to movies and characters and thematic scenes that are played out, under a blazing sun or in the dead of night. And I feel like, if we talk about things that we innately know that no one has to describe to us or tell us. And I feel like this is one of those things that we just know, hey, things are different, during a time of light, or during the day, versus things that happen at night. Right. We have, I don't know about you guys, but I at least have the quote from I think it was my pappy. We always say, nothing good happens after midnight. And it's always, when you're a kid, you're like, come on, get out of here. And then you look back and you're like, man, like there's actually a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, some wisdom.
And then of course the characters, right? You think of the White Knight, and then you think of who's a good
Gandalf the White.
Yeah.
Right.
And then who's a good villain that's just all black.
Sure.
Right.
Any villain, really.
Yeah. It's not just like black. It's darkness. They're coming out at night. They're more muted tones. They enjoy the company of the dark and the things of the dark. And all this before we even touch on the words good and evil, right? But they're right there. They don't need to be spoken in a way because we understand that.
Exactly, yeah. And we are both parents to young children. You don't need to teach children the difference between light and dark. My 8-year-old still doesn't like the dark and still sleeps with several lights on, right?
Certain shadows last night. Here's what happens when you do that. It's kids know this stuff, right?
That's right. It's ubiquitous among age groups, ethnicities, and even between ages. So coming all the way back to this scripture, you wouldn't have had to tell even the ancient Hebrews that would first listen to this that there's a difference between light and dark, not only as it is in the realm of physics, in the realm of astronomy, anything like that, that initially is on the surface of this passage and of what I'm thinking. We somehow inherently just know that light is good, dark is evil. Of course, there's some gray in there.
Sure.
And yet, when it comes to films, when it comes to real life, when it comes to 8-year-olds trying to sleep at night, there's just comfort in the light. And there's fear and trepidation in the dark. And there's something really profound. There's multiple things that are really profound in the first day of creation, where it says that God, his initial act is separating light from darkness. And it was good that light would be separated from darkness.
Right.
And he's giving these light and darkness names.
Yeah.
Meaning that he's got rule over both the good that happens in the world historically and personally, as well as the darkness.
Yeah.
when you name something, you're declaring your rule of right. So this idea that's going on of light that's being separated from dark and God being in control of that, but also first thing he gets about has a lot to it.
Yeah.
But there's a trick question in all this too. The sun won't be created for another 3 days.
Huh. Okay.
So where's the light coming from if there was already the first day, the second day, the third day, and
Yeah.
then the sun is made? Wow, where's that light coming from?
But he's already separated the light from the darkness.
Very separated light from darkness. There's about to be 2 more days that are days
Right.
in this poem of
Right.
Genesis 1.
Right.
But the sun won't get created. The thing that tells us that a day is happening and has occurred
Right.
for another 3 days. So the question is, where's that light coming from?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's got to be a source, right? So if God created everything, then he must be the source, and that's seems to be the only logical outcome if you follow that train of thought.
Exactly. God is the source of the light.
Yeah.
And if you meditated on it a little bit more, and we'll really nail this down in a couple minutes here, but God is not only the source of the light, he is the light.
Right.
He's the boundary of the light, he's the photons of the light, he's the author of the light, he's the ruler of the light, he is the light in a certain sense. The parts make up the whole in that sense. And so on this day one, you can think about it as here's step one to creating the universe, right? Here's just the foundation, right? You get the IKEA package and it's the instruction books and the raw materials, light and dark. You can think of it that way, and that's still true. However, upon meditating on it, these questions and these thoughts, these meditations are really the story that is being told. And I believe that there's an invitation being made here as well. So Kyle, when it comes to good and evil in your life and our lives, as you don't have to spill your guts here on camera and on recording here, but when it comes to the work of good and evil in your own life, in the world today, what comes to mind as far as what it looks like to separate good from light in your day-to-day observation, participation? What does it look like to fight darkness, right? As you were talking about superhero language earlier.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts when you start to go there in your mindset?
So, to me, there's really a couple realms that this plays out in. Number one is in my interpersonal relationships, not only my close ones, but also how am I interacting with other people, right? These are interactions that happen outside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And other people can certainly, openly judge me on those things, right? So that's number one. And then number two are the things that happen between the two ears, right? So that is a whole nother frontier, a whole nother, battle that I think truly is in charge of, a renewal.
Yes.
And so, if I judge somebody harshly, right, but then I treat them kindly, have I done something that is in the light or in the dark? You mentioned gray area. There's some gray area, right? And so, especially, when I think about Christianity, and for me, the Christian title isn't as important as my personal relationship with Jesus. So if I'm looking at that aspect, right, that needs to be more important. So before I dig into that, like what's your kind of take on if you can land that plane maybe better than I should, or
You took flight really well, and I'll try and land it here for us. So I often come between the 2 ears part for me, right? I'm an Enneagram 9, if any of you subscribe to that. So there's a lot of like feeling and empathy going on in me. And so for me, this constant separation of light and dark often is introspective. I think you were getting at that too. It's like, oh man, I feel dark around this sin, around this thought, this action, this inaction. I beat myself up a lot for not doing something. And I bring that before God with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of prayer. It's just always been this routine, a spiritual routine that I tend to have uh, that I don't like. And actually, we will hit on the next episode really hard. But to continue on this path, this battle between light and dark, if we really take a moment and pause and think about it, it is always going on, and it's easily leveraged to grab our attention. The news, as it is right now, will gladly take any semblance of darkness and make it darker. We'll glad and oh yeah, there's this little town hero here, at the 26th minute of the half hour of the news, and then back to like the worst case scenario. We'll tell you more.
There's a reason when you're going through social media, there's now the common term doom scrolling. And there you go.
Exactly. So we are wired for this light versus dark battle.
Yeah.
And God wastes no time saying that he'll do the separation of it.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, like virtually no time. There are thousands of pages in your Bible, and you can't even get to paragraph 3 without him saying, I'm in control.
Yeah.
I've got this battle inside of you, this battle in the universe, before even the sun has to, contest with
provide
the
its own light. Yeah.
Yeah, and be compared and hide and then come forth dawn and dusk. Before any of that battle happens,
Right.
God's like, I'm in control. I will control the boundaries, the names, the power, the lack of power.
Right.
He's authoring and separating all of that.
The only thing that I would add is the and there is let God do this and be intentional about processing those things and taking that to Jesus to work on. Because if you don't, I think that's where we build patterns. We build habits. A lot of people talk about, your habits are really what define you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And so if we get into the habit of not, here's a meta one for you, not thinking about what you're thinking about, that's like a runaway train. But if you're actually going, was that a good thing to contemplate? Or was that, as my family growing up liked to say, was that stinking thinking? And then at that point, that's when we can ask Jesus to take a look at that and do what he does, which is to separate those things and use his wisdom, which he provides graciously if we ask for it, and take it from there.
Yeah, that's really great. And it prompts a question that I didn't have planned, but I think it's worth asking to dig a little bit more. I'll give an offering first, and if you have any more thoughts, is when you're going about this work, Kyle, in your own life, your work, your parenting, right, all that, what are some of the ways that you've seen yourself overcome darkness the best? And so I'll answer first here to give you a little more time to think about it. But for me, typically I'm overcoming whatever the darkness might be. So a couple of things that come to mind is anxiety that I talked about an episode or ago. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's just bad habits, staying up too late or judging people, that sort of thing, or being quick to assume how the future is going to play out between me and the rest of life is a really hard place for me.
Yeah.
And I have found that when I share those things openly and not only get accountability, but encouragement and people that are praying for me and checking in on me on those things, and I commit to what I can do to participate with the ongoing overcoming of that darkness.
Yeah.
That's where I tend to have the most success in overcoming the darkness. Where I don't experience a lot of that overcoming is when I overthink, when I prioritize the darkness last.
Yeah.
When I simply say, oh, I'll pray about that. And that's the farthest my prayer gets.
Right.
Those are the temptations that I have that keep me in those darknesses. Do you have any further thoughts? You did a good job of introducing some of those thoughts of overcoming.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts spur on you on that?
this is probably a good time to shout out to a brilliant man, Dr. Jim Wilder. He's written some pretty cool books and co-authored books like Rare Leadership, The Other Half of Church, and he digs into a whole bunch of really cool brain science. He actually, folks coined the term neurotheologian to discuss Dr. Jim Wilder. And I love the idea of the right brain and the left brain. And I can't begin to articulate as well as he can in some of his works. But essentially, for me, I'll summarize it by saying this: it's giving myself a chance to respond, because naturally we react. We're hardwired to react, which in many ways protects us. And if we dig a little bit deeper and build, for example, the power of pause, right? I'm gonna take a breath. Right, is a big thing we're working on with my son right now. Is let's go through that. And that exercise, by the way, has been extremely powerful. But much like in parenting, as we're teaching our children, we're reinforcing what we may or may not have mastered ourselves.
Sure.
And so when it comes to separating those things, I think it takes a pause to fully examine the situation and even give the opportunity for light to arise. Since, at least for me, I feel like if I react 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be the best of who I can be. Yes. It's not going to be who me and my people should be in this situation, if you will.
That's really, really good. Yeah, a mentor once told me God's presence can only be found in the present.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the only way to really truly be present is to pause and take stock and breathe and pray. And who of us can bring forth the sunrise in our own anger or in our own passion or even in our best intentions? Who of us could bring light about in the morning?
Right.
We can't. And so we have to make those pauses in our life as a regular reminder of this is an act of trust that God is active in this light that I truly want to bring about in this situation, whether it's with a kid or an internal struggle, an external struggle at any time. So with that, let's bring our thoughts to Jesus with a passage of scripture here in John chapter 1. And this refrain, you'll catch some very familiar words here as we begin the book of John. John 1:1 starts with, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it." So here, Jesus, in the opening words of the book of John, is depicted as being at creation, an active participant of creation, the author and the creator of creation. But then where does John go immediately? He's also the light. He's the light of us human beings. And the darkness has not overcome the light. How encouraging is that word? I guess I'll speak right to it. How encouraging is that word, that just getting into the opening of this book, John's like, God is in control. He's always been in control. Jesus has been God since the beginning. And that darkness that you fear, whatever darkness you're bringing or you're encountering,
right?
Darkness has never won.
Yeah.
Darkness has never overcome the light, and you can rest in that. So Kyle, any thoughts before we wrap up here on Jesus, his role in being the light, darkness, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, this is just a huge note of encouragement wherever you're at in your exploration of these things, whatever your understanding or background. Just know that as far as takeaways go, the light not only has won, but this is another one of those fear elimination exercises. When we go back to these truths, it helps us to remember that whatever valley we're in, whatever we're going through, ultimately it has been conquered.
Mhm.
And it's so easy, especially as Phil alluded to, in a world that reminds us what we should be fearful of,
Mhm.
we can cling to something even more powerful. And when we fully embrace what that is, what that truth is of Jesus' victory and his light that cannot be quenched or put out by the darkness,
Mhm.
it allows us to live our lives from a certain place of freedom that we wouldn't be able to do without a full understanding of his authorship of not only our lives, but creation.
Mhm.
And that is a very fun place to begin creating from, especially when it comes to leveling up our lives and also the lives of everyone that we come in contact with.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm gonna process some of this out loud, even on things going on in my own heart, and invite you and the listener to do the same. Because as I'm thinking through all this, especially the way you just processed it now, when it comes to my anxieties about the future and how it might go or not go, what an exciting thought to pause in those moments and wonder, God, how are you going to overcome this?
Yeah.
That thought is freeing to me. Now, I'm not in the battle of my anxiety this moment, but how freeing and exciting is that to think rather than, oh no, I did this stupid thing and now this thing's going to happen, or how am I possibly going to overcome this anxiety or this daunting thing that's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
What if I paused first, like we said earlier, and how important it is to become present with these meditations given to us by scripture and say, wow, God, the darkness has never overcome you. You've always been overcoming the darkness with your light. How are you going to do that in this situation? How are you going to do this with my finances? How are you going to do this with this relationship, with this aspect of my work? I wonder how you're going to do that and how I can participate with you in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting me excited right now to start pausing and considering things
Mm-hmm.
that way.
How about this, right? When you talk about participating,
Mm.
for any sports fans out there, right? Picture circa the 90s and the Bulls are kicking butt, taking names in the NBA, right? And you get to pick somebody to be on your team. Who are you gonna pick?
Gotta be MJ.
It's gotta be, right? So
Michael Jordan, yes.
so now, right? Think about yourself participating with the Lord as you move through life. You've got an incredible upper hand. And if that doesn't give you a better outlook,
Right. Who doesn't want to be on Michael Jordan's team in the
right?
90s, right? And can we build a similar holy desire and envy even of like, oh, I want to be with God no matter what
Right.
is the next thing.
Right. Well, and think about this too. Now here's the little catch, right? If I'm on the Lord's team, right? If I'm on, pick the top star in your favorite sport, right? I mean, who's the football from across the pond? Who's the
I mean,
Ronaldo,
yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
How much harder am I going to train to be on that team and to show up the best way I can? Okay, so this is a combination of trusting that the Lord's going to come through and also trusting that he's given us unique gifts and talents, not for us to sit on,
That's right.
but for us to come out fully alive and use.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a process. You don't have to rush that, right? The old adage is true. Rome wasn't built in a day. And let that partnership truly bring out the best in you.
That's right. And I'll wrap this up here with that is that when you consider the character, the importance, the relevancy, and the power of God as a teammate that is actually inviting us, right, to come alongside the Michael Jordan of the gods, if you will, right? Man, how that should be the inspiration for wanting to give our all instead of saying, oh boy, I better give it my all or it's not going to work out. I'm not going to overcome this thing. when we realize that we're already teamed up with the capital O overcomer of
Right.
darkness, what can get in our way?
Right.
And so may you rest easy in the God that initiates and the conquest and the conquering over darkness and participate with his light.
Thanks for listening to the Invitation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, kindly invite others, see what I did there, Kyle, to listen in by sharing it with a friend, posting about it on social media, or even leaving a rating and a review.
To catch all the latest and greatest, give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X at The Invitation Pod, and help us share the invitation with others. Thanks again. We hope you'll tune in to future episodes.
Forward on this computer. And make sure the mic is. Should we done this first?
We gotta check the audio settings.
Yeah, we're good.
Clip. Test. Test. Good.
Good there. And then
Oh yeah, you're gonna hit record. There you go.
boom.
Nice.
I think we went long.
We may have.